What's your story?
Sure. Yeah, I think because of when I was pregnant, I had the fortune of it being talked about. Like it definitely has been talked about a lot in the last 10 years, I'd say. I think the first time I remember hearing about postpartum depression was when Brooke Shields went on whatever talk show she went on and started talking about her own experience with it. But my experience was I was prepared, knowing that this is a thing, but again, didn't necessarily recognize the signs and symptoms within myself. I think I had more of postpartum anxiety than depression, because I did feel a bond with my daughter, but I just felt very overwhelmed and very anxious about what was going to happen to her, whether or not I was taking good care of her, and just felt very like everything needed to be done just so, and if it wasn't, I kind of broke down. I cried a lot, and I really struggled. I also really wanted to breastfeed, and I really struggled with it. My birth was also something that wasn't really traumatic. I didn't have interventions. My birth was not super fast in 2 hours, but it was in under 10 hours. For a first pregnancy is pretty quick. And it was not, it wasn't anything really extreme. I didn't have to have like an emergency C-section or any other kind of like medical intervention. So in that way, it was a fairly smooth birth, but just the postpartum portion, I felt like I felt very underprepared and very, even though we had family support, and I had my partner, I really struggled with just taking care of her for the first 2 months, and just like feeling confident, feeling like I could take care of her, that I wasn't like causing serious damage to her. And the biggest sticking point really around that was around breastfeeding, and the fact that it was not super easy for me, and providing formula felt like I was like being a bad mom, or that I was, wasn't sufficient or wasn't taking good care of her. And it also affected my partner, because he felt like he couldn't feed her. And so then if I felt very overwhelmed and needed a break, he would then have to give her right back to me because she needed to eat and he couldn't feed her. So it kind of was a feedback loop that went on for several weeks, until the point where I just kind of had a breakdown. And Tony actually told me, he was like, we can give her formula. It's not going to hurt her. Like, let me do this. And you need a night to yourself, because we had been, we were new parents. We had been up.
Let me stop there. Honestly, what I really did, I called her best friends. Oh, yeah. Don't give me all that credit. I called her best friends and I said, all right, y'all need to step in. Y'all help her out. I'm gonna go stay at my mom's house. Y'all pour into her love. I didn't know what to do, right? I knew the formula could have helped, but I was like, honestly, I really didn't know what to do. So I just called her friends and I said, look, y'all do it and y'all tell me where to go from there. So I really can't take all that credit.
Yeah. So I went and stayed at his mom's house, and
you stayed at, you're right, yeah. You're right.
And he and my mom and his mom took care of the baby for one night. That's actually the only night that I've been away from her in a year and a half. And I just like cried and like hung out in a bed without the baby, and watched some TV. And my friend came over and talked with me about, how I was feeling. And they gave her formula because I wasn't there, and she was fine. And after that, we kind of like worked our way, into having a little bit less anxiety, and like talking more about how we were all feeling. And yeah, so that was my experience with postpartum depression and anxiety.
Thank you. Let's go to Irene.
Hi. So I had an abortion, and I was unprepared for the hormonal soup that was that was going to happen after it. So, leading up to that, I'd always struggled with birth control, hormonal birth control. It had always been like throwing me off emotionally. And so, before I'd even found out I was pregnant, I had kept a diary, right? And if you go back through the diary, you can kind of see like where the anxiety kind of spikes, like from when I get, when I conceive or whatever. And then, and so I kept a diet through this entire time. I ended up like traumatized in the clinic because I did it in Texas, and that was a real bad idea. And from there, they gave me a bunch of more hormones, like for birth control. And I was in a massive amount of depression, like the kind of depression where I would go to bed on a Friday and not get up till Monday. That type of depression. That went on for 4 months, 5 months. And like suicide ideation. Like there was the first person that talked, like I really like understood what you were talking about as far as like kind of some of the bipolar mental illness stuff. I don't have that, but I think that time period almost gave that to me, right? With the emotional soup that was in there, like the hormonal soup, I really think put it forward. And, I ended up getting out of that spiral with the help of getting on an antidepressant, which I've gotten off of now. But that was the only way I had energy to get up again. That was the only way that I could even continue with life or functioning. And I wish that someone would have told me about that. Just like I'm sure like a lot of you guys felt that way with like postpartum. I wish someone there had been more heads up about that, like how much this all comes together and your brain chemistry being thrown off. So yeah, I ended up struggling with some drug use in the fallout from it, which I hadn't struggled with that before, at least not that drug, right? Let's be honest. And, that's, what I saw, that's why when I saw this topic pop up, I wanted to talk to other people about what are these pregnancy hormone things and what are they doing to our bodies? And am I a risk if I actually want to do this for postpartum, and how do we get through this? Right. So anyway, that's my story,
Tony's doing dinner real quick.
Sorry, we're feeding the baby. My wife got me, we cut everything with the damn scissors. All right, so we're going to go to Venita next. Venita and I have been friends for a very, very long time. And she does work in clinical social work and stuff like that. And she's kind of always been like the person in the background when I'm saying shit that's not truly appropriate. She's like, hold on, think about this. Say it this way. So I really want to highlight her story because, I'm just very appreciative, one, Venita, that you're here and that you're willing to share your story with this and on this platform. So Venita's next.
Yeah. So first, Tony, I just wanted to thank you for holding this space for all of us. And so yeah, I'm going to try to approach this and my story as a human first, and then kind of integrating my clinical background second. So just a little correction for you, Tony. Started off as a nurse, and then I went into family nursing practice. And so, but there's a lot that nurses and social workers have in common. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I love the public health work that you guys are doing as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. So my story, I'll start off with my first pregnancy. My pregnancy was essentially pretty smooth sailing with my son. This was back between 2011 and 2012 to when he was born. My labor was incredibly long. I had stayed home for about 36 hours with, semi-regular contractions, not sleeping very well finally went into the hospital when my contractions were like about 3 to 5 minutes apart. And so long story short, I ended up developing a little bit of a fever during my labor, and that subsequently led to baby's faster heartbeat. I ended up having to have an emergency C-section. So immediately, what I already knew was that my baby was going to go to the special care nursery. And also knew that I would have to be confined to bed for a few hours after the spinal were to wear off, that I would have to go back and forth to the special care nursery and back to my room. So I think that kind of set a precedence for some of the trauma, the trauma of having expectations of where you want to be with your birth and where you would want to be with your bonding with your baby. I kind of knew something was wrong from the get-go, because even though I was making an effort to go see my kid every 2 to 3 hours to try to feed, there was always something that my mother said to me. She says, you know, when you meet your baby for the first time, you're going to fall right in love with them, and you're never going to know a love and a joy as big as this. And I knew when I looked at him, I knew that I loved him, but I didn't feel that blossoming joy. I didn't feel that blossoming bliss. And a lot of my other friends who were parents as well, they kept on feeding into this thought, like, you're going to just fall in love right away and it's going to change your whole world. And I just felt like my world was not changing in a positive way. And so eventually we'd be discharged home. My mom flew in from Massachusetts, and I had other family members who were visiting as well. And I was just feeling overwhelmed. I'm just trying to get to know my baby, getting to know what it's like to be a mom. And all of a sudden, everybody wants to visit. And everybody's really well-intentioned. But really, when you go home after you give birth, like, in retrospect, like, I shouldn't have to be entertaining other people, you know? And in fact, in my dad's culture in Vietnam, after you have a baby, everybody attends to you and they let you rest and they let you bond with your baby. And in terms of what happened for me, my mom didn't really realize what I needed. My step grandma and my aunt and her kids, they were there for several hours. I just felt exhausted. On the other hand, my in-laws, my husband's family, I remember them coming over. I was sleeping on the couch and they brought over some groceries. They cleaned the house, they cooked dinner, and then they left. And so that was a one positive thing that I had there. But to me, postpartum depression kind of happened in fragments. I didn't realize it right away until I was about 4 to 5 months postpartum. I was finding myself not being attached. I couldn't wait until my husband got home. On the days that I was home from the hospital, not working at the hospital as a nurse, I just wanted to kind of just step away, pass the baby along, and then sit on the couch and just watch them play. It eventually happened so that around 6 months postpartum, I was a lot more irritable, depressed, disengaged, that I started ruminating about not wanting to be here. I would daydream about driving somewhere and not coming back. I would daydream about driving off of a bridge. And I was so ashamed of feeling unattached to my son that I felt like I didn't deserve to live. Sorry, this is bringing up some emotions for me right now. And that's even a painful thing to say right now. And so we'll probably talk more about this later, I think, but my husband recognized how bad it had gotten. And this thing does not happen in a vacuum. It happens slowly over time. He sat me down and he said, if you don't get help right now, I am going to find a way to get you into a 72-hour hold, which means they put you in a hospital in the psychiatric ward. He said, I will either have that happen, or you could reach out to your primary care provider and you can start counseling. And so having that ultimatum, I chose his second option. And in retrospect, I was very thankful for it. I did reach out to my PCP and I did establish with a therapist, and it was long and it was hard work. So that's my first pregnancy. We didn't even know that we wanted to have a second child, but I was in a much better place. I found something that helped to relieve my anxiety. I'd only been on antidepressants for maybe a year and a half after that 6-month postpartum period, and I was able to get off of them. But we were starting to contemplate a second pregnancy, and so I was being seen by a midwife group out here in Washington, and I told the midwife group that I was seeing that I did want to start antidepressant treatment between my second and third trimester. And then they got me linked in with a medical social worker and therapist that works out of Swedish perinatal mental health services here in Seattle, Washington. And so I was able to get linked in with a therapist right away. I was able to choose which antidepressant I wanted to get on, which would also be okay with breastfeeding. And then my second outcome ended up being better. I still struggled, and there were things that happened a few months after my daughter was born that made my anxiety and depression a little worse. But it was a much different experience the second time around, knowing what I know.